House will please be in order. Those persons not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer today by the gentleman of the 55th Delegate Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come together today as a family of delegates. Our seating assignments in this chamber are of no consequence so long as we reach up to you and praise you. We love you and we give thanks for loving us. Father, we understand that our neighbors are not just confined to our delegate districts, that our neighbors include every West Virginian, and for the understanding that the decisions that we make in this chamber have far-reaching effects. The love and concern for our neighbors extends to all living in our nation and around the globe. We lift up to you our neighbors in Ukraine and elsewhere where there is pain and suffering, for no matter what language they might speak, many are our brothers and sisters in Christ. Guide us today in our deliberations. We give thanks for the gift of wisdom you grant to the 100 delegates in this chamber. We give thanks for the wisdom you grant to the medical professionals around the globe as they tend to those on the battlefield. We give thanks for medical technology, which allows medical teams to take a heart and liver from one of your creations and implant it into another. We pray blessings over Logan Elder in Harrison County as these new organs give him a new lease on life. We give thanks for allowing us to live in the greatest state in the greatest country on earth. More than anything, Lord, we give thanks for the gift of everlasting life, only found through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. If all members and guests will please remain standing, we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman from the 59th District, Delegate Reed.
Thank you. Will you please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Monday, February 28, 2022.
Journal 63rd, Delegate Hardy.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Journal 63rd, ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? No objections are heard. Lady from the 49th for a calendar update.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Special calendar, third reading, committee substitute for House Bill 4089 and House Bill 4482 to House calendar. On special calendar, second reading, committee substitute for Senate Bill 419 and Senate Bill 499 and House Bill 4623 and 4843 to House calendar.
Introductions. Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our doctor of the day will be Andy Tanner from Charleston, if we could make him welcome.
Gentleman to 46th, Delegate Burkhammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome my aunt, Twyla Schock, and my uncle, Mike Schock, up in the North Gallery, if we can make them welcome today.
Lady in the 24th, Delegate Mazzocchi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am tickled to death here that I have some people from Logan County, and their names is Janet Clothier Nichols, Michael Gibson, Larry Chafin, Jack Hatfield, and Albana Nichols from the Hatfield McCoy Foundation. Make them welcome.
Gentleman 39th, Delegate Farrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am honored to introduce a couple of special guests today. They stand here at the foyer. The other day, Delegate Honaker mentioned our state's first female trooper pilot, Miss Tiffany Huffman. Tiffany is a 2009 graduate of Braxton County High School and a 2015 graduate of the Academy. She just acquired a private pilot's license there. She's Trooper First Class. She joined with us this morning by Major Sharon Oglesby. She's a 95 graduate of Morgantown High School. I'd like for the Chamber to please welcome some of our finest and that we're fighting for. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 46th, Second Burkhammer.
Mr. Speaker, sorry I didn't see that my YLA kids made their way in, and so if they would please stand, I'd like to make them welcome. My nephew Zane Stewart, I got Carter Holden, Shelby Hamrick, Hope Lamb, and they're chaperoned by Mrs. Fisher. If we can make them welcome.
Gentleman from the 48th, I got Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Riley, Delegate Kimball, and Delegate Hamrick, we have several friends from Harrison County today as part of our youth leadership program. When I call your name, please stand. Briley Shepard, James Fazilaire, Brianna Starkey, Aiden Carlson, Gianna Fragman, Jackson Poe, Samuel Waybright, Irissa Ernest, Taylor Leon, Owen Dodd, Trenton Renner, Madeline Monroe, KJ Linger, Drew Skidmore, Maggie Paul, Abigail Lauk, Brianna Rock, Ava Scalapio, Armando Montero, and Aniston Azuka. They are escorted by their chaperones Seth Marshall, Megan Mitchell, Heidi Griffith, and Jason Haynes. If you all would please make these middle schoolers welcome.
The gentleman from the 35th, Douglas Scaff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Boggs, we'd like to welcome some youth and government students from Braxton County Middle School. If we would hold your applause till the end, and we'll recognize them all. We have Esme Arambula, Cooper Belknap, Jamie Nettles, Savannah Branham, Bianca Grando, Lauren Pritt, Grace Dyer, Robert Myers, Victoria Pack, Alexis Knowlton, Gabe Hacker, and Joel Sigmund. And they are escorted by their sponsors, Pat Facemeyer and Lori Dittman. Can we please make them feel welcome?
The gentleman from the 27th, Douglas Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of our Mercer County delegates, we have a page today, Nevaeh Wilborn from Princeton Middle School, if she's here, and then she may be attended by her family. So if they're available, please stand in the house. Please make them feel welcome.
Gentleman from the 48th, Douglas Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, joining us, we have a page, Landon Davis, if he'd please stand up, and he's accompanied by his mother, Brittany. Thank you. The House will make him welcome.
Lady from the 13th, Douglas Kraus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I have a page, Matthias McClanahan. If he'd please stand up. He is accompanied by his mom up in the South Gallery, Martha McClanahan. He's a homeschooler out of Putnam County, and if the body would make him welcome, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Are there further introductions? Lady from the 35th, Douglas Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a page joining me today. Her name is Maddie Wallace. If she could stand up, she's accompanied by her dad, Chris Wallace, who's a very old friend of mine. If everybody can make him feel welcome.
Gentleman 36, Douglas Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the delegates from the 36th have 3 pages from Horace Mann Middle School, and I'd like to introduce them if they would stand as I introduce them over here. We have Chloe Petrie, Catherine Murray, and Aiden Miles. And I should say Aiden Miles is the grandson of Ed Hill, who is one of my friends from law school. I'm delighted to have them, and they are escorted by Michelle Murray, Catherine's mom. And I'm not sure which gallery she's in, but could you all stand, and would you all in the house give them a warm, warm welcome? Thank you.
Are there further introductions? If not, standing committee reports.
Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement has had under consideration Senate Bill 442 relating to West Virginia Public Employee Retirement System. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 443, including police and firefighter as electors of trustees for certain pension funds. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 641, requiring Consolidated Public Retirement Board to set contributions to Deputy Sheriff's Retirement System. Senate Bill 669, relating to contribution levels of certain judges who participate in retirement system. And Senate Bill 670, permitting newly hired 911 personnel to participate in emergency medical services retirement fund or retirement system, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received, and each of the bills will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 31, applying to the Congress of the United States to call a convention of the states, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it be adopted, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Rules.
That report will be received, and the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 520, increasing financial penalties for ransomware attacks, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 524, placing duties and functions of certain boards and commissions under Department of Arts, Culture, and History. Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 537, providing additional firefighters and security guards for National Guard. Senate Bill 597, relating to PSC underground facilities damage prevention and one-call system. And Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 598, establishing partnerships and aid for at-risk veterans to combat suicide, and reports the same back with recommendation that they each do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 523, transferring oversight of Jobs Investment Trust Fund to West Virginia Economic Development Authority, and Senate Bill 542, transferring Broadband Enhancement Council from Department of Commerce to Department of Economic Development, and reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that they each do pass as amended.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Senate Bill 22, relating to exempting certain organizations from property taxation, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received, and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 246, requiring newly constructed public schools and public schools with major improvements to have water bottle filling stations, and Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 261, requiring video cameras in certain special education classrooms, and reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that they each do pass as amended, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
The report will be received, and both bills will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 5, James Big Jim Schaefer Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 39, Donald L. Stuckey Memorial Bridge, House Concurrent Resolution 56, Roy Lee Shamlin Memorial Bridge, Committee Substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 28, U.S. Army Private Garland Lee Loudermilk Memorial Bridge, and Committee Substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 29, Nitro World War I Memorial Bridge, and reports the same back with recommendation that they each be adopted, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Rules.
That report will be received, and each resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration Senate Bill 91, creating Choose Life special registration plates supporting adoption, and Senate Bill 129, making it unlawful for public utility to prohibit customers from hiring contractors to construct, install, or maintain connections to public utility, and reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that they each do pass as amended, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
The report will be received, and both bills will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 216, creating Student Journalist Press Freedom Restoration Act, and reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, and with the recommendation that second reference to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with, but that it be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
That report will be received, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The two chairs have conferred on this matter, and I now ask unanimous consent that the second reference of the bill to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with.
Lady from the 49th, ask unanimous consent that the second reference for Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 216 to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with. Are there objections? No objections are heard. Second reference to finance will be dispensed with, and instead the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary. Are there further standing committee reports? If not, select committee reports. Executive messages.
A communication from His Excellency the Governor advises that on February 28, 2022, he approved committee substitute for House Bill 3312.
That message will be received. Are there further executive messages? If not, Senate messages.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed the following bills. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 71, prohibiting political subdivisions from enacting certain ordinances, regulations, local policies, or other legal requirements.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 420, relating to distribution of certain taxes and surcharges to benefit volunteer and part volunteer fire departments.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 466, relating to limitations on civil actions or appeals brought by inmates.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 522, combining offices of West Virginia State Americans with Disabilities Act and West Virginia Equal Employment Opportunity.
For what purposes, ladies and 51st seek recognition? Okay, message to be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 536, relating generally to controlled substance criminal offenses.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 582, creating West Virginia Workforce Resiliency Act.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Senate Bill 603, prohibiting licensure and relicensure in West Virginia if applicant is prohibited from practicing in another jurisdiction.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Senate Bill 638, changing hearing and notice provisions for failing or distressed public utilities.
The message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill has already passed the House, so I ask unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration, dispense with the committee reference, and read a first time.
Lady from the 49th, ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 638 be taken up for immediate consideration. Its committee reference be dispensed with and that the bill be read a first time. Are there objections? No objections are heard. The clerk will please read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 638, changing hearing and notice provisions for failing or distressed public utilities.
Bill will be advanced to second reading. Next Senate message.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 694, relating to oil and gas conservation.
Message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Energy and Manufacturing, then the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 698, relating to number and selection of members for Governor's Veterans Council.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 701, including children and spouses of deceased active duty officers in eligibility for War Orphan Education Program.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Education.
Senate Bill 713, removing statutory limit for Environmental Laboratory Certification Fund.
Message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is the same as House Bill 4482, so therefore, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the bill be taken up for immediate consideration, dispense with the committee reference, and read a first time.
Lady from the 49th, ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 713 be taken up for immediate consideration. Its committee reference be dispensed with and that the bill be read a first time. Are there objections? No objections are heard. The clerk will please read the bill a first time.
Senate Bill 713, removing statutory limit for Environmental Laboratory Certification Fund.
Bill will be advanced to second reading. Next Senate message.
Senate Bill 714, relating to tie votes by Coal Mine Safety and Technical Review Committee.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has adopted the following resolution. Senate Concurrent Resolution 53, requesting Office of Miners Health, Safety, and Training study need for Health, Safety, and Training Division in energy-producing facilities.
The message will be received and that resolution will be referred to the Committee on Energy and Manufacturing, then the Committee on Rules. Are there further Senate messages? If not, resolutions, petitions, motions, bills introduced, unfinished business, bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2733 relating to the establishment of a Combat Action Badge and Combat Action Ribbon special registration plates.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman to 15th, Douglas Foster, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to create a special registration plates for Combat Action Badge and similar branch-specific awards designated to recognize the recipient's participation in active armed combat against adversary of the United States. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge its passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There were 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2733 relating to the establishment of a Combat Action Badge and Combat Action Ribbon special registration plates.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2838 authorize the ordering of restitution to the state for reimbursement of costs incurred for misuse of public funds and to create the state auditor's public integrity and fraud fund for use of said funds.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman to 64th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill would amend current law relating to special revenue funds administered by the state auditor. The bill would create a new fund in this section, the State Auditor's Public Integrity and Fraud Fund. Its purpose is to enhance fraud detection, prevention, transparency, and enforcement efforts for the purposes of carrying out the duties under West Virginia Code 6-9-1. This new fund would be funded by a new source of revenue, which are court-ordered reimbursement to the state auditor for the actual cost of auditing, investigating, or prosecuting a violation in a case where a defendant is convicted of a felony or misdemeanor based upon any audit, examination, or investigation by the state auditor which discloses misfeasance, malfeasance, or nonfeasance in the office on the part of any public officer or employee. 11-6-26 would be amended to change the disposition of year-end balances for a previously created special revenue fund described in the statute as a special operating fund administered by the state auditor to receive and disperse funds relating to the duties of the auditor's Public Utilities Division. Under current law, any balance on each July 31st in excess of 1% of gross revenues plus $50,000 are transferred to the General Revenue Fund. The bill would change that. As written, any balance at the end of each fiscal year in excess of 20% of the gross revenues from the Special Operating Fund operations would be transferred to the General Revenue Fund. 11-6-27 would be amended to change provisions for a previously created Special Revenue Fund administered by the state auditor known as the Public Utilities Tax Loss Restoration Fund, from which its proceeds are distributed quarterly on a proportional basis to counties, districts, and municipalities that have lost assessed value from the prior year's assessment. The bill would add new language to allow the auditor to invest a balance of this fund and may use the additional earning from investments to support any West Virginia Code section administered by the auditor related to local government oversight or the general operations of the office. And lastly, 11A-3-36 would be amended to change the disposition of year-end balances for a previously created special revenue fund described in the statute as a special operating fund administered by the state auditor. Under current law, any balance at the end of each fiscal year in excess of $100,000 would be transferred to the general school fund. The bill would change that. As written, any balance at the end of each fiscal year in excess of 20% of the gross revenues from the special operating funds would be transferred to the general school fund. The general school fund is a constitutionally established fund dedicated to support public education. That's the bill, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2838, authorize the ordering of restitution to the state for reimbursement of costs incurred for misuse of public funds and to create the state auditor's public integrity and fraud fund for use of said funds.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4012, prohibiting the showing of proof of a COVID-19 vaccination.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Gentleman 32nd Douglas Fast to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 4012. It provides that a state or local governmental official, entity, department, or agency may not require proof of vaccination as a condition of entering upon the premises. There is an exception that this prohibition does not apply to any local government facility that is leased to a private entity, where the local government unit primarily serves as a property owner receiving rental payments. Number 2, a hospital may not require proof of vaccination as a condition of entering upon the premises. Number 3, a state institution of higher education may not require proof of vaccination as either 1, a condition of enrollment, or 2, a condition of entering onto its premises. The bill includes provisos for all 3 entities: government facilities, hospitals, and higher education institutions, stating that the provisions do not apply if any federal law or regulation requires proof of vaccine as a condition of entering the premises. Lastly, any person harmed by a violation of this section may bring an action for injunctive relief in a court of competent jurisdiction, and upon prevailing may be awarded reasonable attorney's fees and court costs. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? As there debate on the bill, Lady 35th Douglas Young is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Vice Chairman yield for a quick question?
Yes.
Thank you. So state or local government, hospital, or state institution of higher ed, that's the 3 groups we're talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and do any of them currently require proof of vaccination, or has this happened here in West Virginia that you know of?
I have only heard that some do, but...
Who?
I have just heard that some do, not by name, just in general.
Some,
so, I mean,
which group?
That would be hospitals and government buildings.
Okay.
But that would just be a matter of research that one would have to do on their own.
Okay, was this in your committee?
Yes, this bill ran through Judiciary Committee.
Okay, and did somebody testify that one of these 3 groups was doing this?
No, not in committee.
Okay, just rumors?
I'm not going to say they were rumors. I'm telling you that I, as a person, have heard that some of the institutions have required vaccination for entry.
Okay, so it was a higher ed institution?
I've answered the question, asked and answered.
Oh, thank you.
The gentleman of 51st, Douglas Hanson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to ask the Vice Chair to yield.
Yes.
I have a question about the hospitals. Who exactly does this bill apply to in relationship to the hospitals?
The bill says hospitals, all hospitals, public and private, for anyone who enters on the premises.
Does it apply just to, does it apply to visitors and patients, or does it also apply to nurses and doctors?
Both.
Nurses and doctors as well?
Yes.
Okay. And What about other types of vaccinations? My understanding is that it's routine to require vaccinations for flu, for example.
This bill only pertains to COVID vaccinations.
Okay, so they could continue to require vaccinations for other.
All I can say is this bill only pertains to COVID vaccinations.
And do you know why COVID vaccinations are being singled out and treated differently from other types of vaccinations?
All I can say is this bill pertains to COVID vaccinations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman 19, Tucker Griffith, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what we've got here is another flanking maneuver around science and life-saving medical practices. Every time something happens at the federal level, this seems to happen at the state level. Why did there's some exceptions in here, as you can see, that if any federal law or regulation requires proof of a vaccine as a condition of entering the premises, the provisions of this subsection shall not apply. Well, that's happened. And as we have seen, the Supreme Court upheld it. And we have a provision in here that a person harmed by a violation of this section may bring action for injunctive relief. What about a person who dies of COVID? Do they have any recourse that someone came into a hospital and they weren't required to show a proof of vaccination and they spread it? What about in a dormitory? A dormitory is an awful lot like a cruise ship. It's a closed area where everybody eats together, you live together, you go to the same bathroom, and yet we're not going to allow institutions of higher education to protect their students, their faculty. I know what the intention is here. You want to give something back to the people that our rights are being violated. What about the right to life? It just astounds me. And as I look at these provisions in here, I keep thinking about the people in my county. And some of you may have heard me comment on this, that our pharmacy's given over 4,000 vaccinations back home. Nobody who got that vaccination is among the dead. However, there's 109 or 110 Wayne Countyans that are dead that weren't vaccinated. And I know of them, 20 of them personally, and about 5 or 6 of them were my friends. I just want us to follow science and medical practices and do what's best. I don't think there's anyone in here in their 70s that goes to a restaurant and is asked to show a proof of ID to get an alcoholic beverage, feels like we ought to have a law against that. And yet we're creating a rule here that's going to prohibit institutions of higher education, hospitals who came here when we first started talking about this. They were here. The Hospital Association, businesses were here, bankers were here, insurance people were here saying, please don't restrict the most efficient way that we can stop this pandemic. Let's don't put brakes on it. Let's get it over with. And yet every time we turn around, and we'll have another one tomorrow, there's an attempt to usurp those rules instead of let's get together, let's end this thing with good medical practices. And so we're going to make it so, personally, a person that is asked for a vaccine, if they feel like they were harmed, they can sue. But if somebody comes in there unvaccinated and they infect someone, or a nurse comes in there unvaccinated and they're hovering over a patient at risk, people are going to die. When is that more important than all the other reasons given for doing this? I beg you to work together to make this pandemic end, not continue to have measures that handicap the ability to end this for our society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman 36, Docket Rowe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the gentleman would answer a couple of questions for me.
I will try.
As I understand the structure of the bill, it basically says state and local governments, hospitals.
State, local government, entity, department, or agency, hospitals, state institutions of higher education.
Okay, so very specific. It does not apply to businesses, correct? In other words, a restaurant can still require proof of vaccination.
Private businesses, no.
All right. And it only reaches the COVID vaccine. It doesn't apply to measles, whooping cough, which my brother had at 9, polio or TB. It does not apply to those specifically, correct?
Gentleman is correct.
Do you know if in other parts of the code that there's anything like this ban on proof of vaccination? Is this something new?
I'm not aware of any such.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
The gentleman 36, Doug Barrick.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Will the Vice Chair yield for a couple quick questions?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you very much. You said that this is specific to COVID. I'm looking at the bill, but it's even more specific than that. It says COVID-19. So if we have another SARS variant come around this year and it's deemed to be COVID-22, then this would not apply to that. Is that correct? I'm sorry?
I believe the gentleman is correct.
Okay, so as I look around this room here, I notice that I'm not seeing a lot of masks around here. I went to Kroger the other day. They took masks off in their store. It seems that, I'm not saying that COVID-19 is over, but things seem to be winding down. So I'm asking what the point is to doing this. If this winds down and we're not having to carry around this information about our inoculation and we're looking at possibly another COVID variant coming in here, then this whole bill is worthless. So why even have it is my question.
That is a policy question you'll have to answer for yourself. The bill is before us. We're going to have to vote on it.
Yes.
Up or down. Here we
Okay,
go.
thank you. You answered it. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, can I speak to the bill?
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
Yeah, I think we see that this is just an election year red meat bill trying to get votes, donations, things like that. And we should probably vote for it just because it's really kind of worthless and that'll take away any political advantage. So I think I'll vote for it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Just to be clear for all the members, we have 70 bills on the calendar between today and tomorrow, and that will be the last time we have debate about motives of any of the members for any of the bills on this calendar. Do we have other debate on the bill? If not, the question, does anyone wish to close debate on the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine.
The following members have paired. Delegate Hott, yea. Delegate Pushkin, nay. Delegate Pinson, yea. Delegate Hornbuckle, nay.
Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there were 80 ayes, 16 nays, and 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4012, prohibiting the showing of proof of a COVID-19 vaccination.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4064, allowing antique car license plates for cars over 10,000 pounds.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman the 15th will explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to allow for trucks up to and exceeding 10,000 pounds to be registered as antique vehicles when no longer used for used as commercial vehicles. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
The question before the House: shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 91 ayes, 1 nay, and 8 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4064, allowing antique car license plates for cars over 10,000 pounds.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4071, mask and quarantine option for parents and faculty.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman, the 35th Delegate Capito to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The committee substitute for House Bill 4071 creates the Public School Health Rights Act and provides that a public school shall not impose a COVID-19 mask or face covering requirement on any student or employee. It may not impose a mandatory COVID-19 testing requirement on any asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic student or employee. It also may not require a student or employee to quarantine or isolate unless they have tested positive for COVID-19. A parent or guardian of the student maintains the right to determine whether their child will wear a mask or face covering on school premises or during extracurricular activities. Any period of quarantine shall end after the student or employee has obtained a negative COVID-19 test result or after 5 days of quarantine. The rights in this act shall not be overridden by any elected or appointed official. The bill expressly does not prevent any person from wearing a face covering if they choose to wear one, and it provides a remedy of injunctive relief in the event that somebody seeks such relief. You know, I want to tell just kind of a quick story, probably a similar one that all of us can relate to that have children. I have a 6-year-old that's in first grade, and the county where she goes to school lifted their mask mandate recently. And my daughter jumped in the car in her mask that was, you know, somewhat mangled like it usually is and down around here. And she said, "Dad, I have the best news." And I said, "Honey, that's great. What is that?" She goes, "We don't have to wear masks anymore." And I said, "That's wonderful." And the look on her face, I mean, it was almost this kind of moment when I saw her smile, I could see her face, and the news that she was delivering to me and how happy she was that she would be able to see her classmates and her teacher. You know, I think all of us have heard a lot about this bill. I've heard from students, parents, educators, administrators, among others, that are for this bill. Some of those people don't want to come out and speak in favor of it. I don't think that certain groups might support them supporting this, but I think the vast majority of West Virginians support this concept. And we hear about local control, and arguments can be made, but the very essence, as we've heard before, of local control is allowing parents to have input on how their children are educated. The goalposts have been moved so many times during this pandemic, whether it's the CDC, the WHO, our school boards, our state Department of Education, and it's nobody's fault. Nobody's fault. But when we have so much confusion and so much back and forth and unpredictability, that's when it's time for the legislature to step in and act, to provide some stability, to provide predictability for our children, because we are talking about our children. Our children need stability. The president said last month that this is endemic, not a pandemic any longer, and this is something that we need to learn to live with. I think we all agree about that. And I think the vast majority of West Virginians would agree that we're willing to live with it, but not with our children in masks. Mr. Speaker, urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Gentleman 66, Douglas Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield?
Yes.
I had planned to ask this question yesterday, but I was otherwise occupied. On page 2, lines 7 and 8, reads, a parent or guardian of a student maintains the right to determine whether the child will wear a mask or face covering on school premises or during extracurricular activities. As a softball official, it occurred to me that under WVSSAC rules, we do require certain participants to wear masks or some combination of a helmet and a mask, like your catchers, I guess lacrosse, if I'm not mistaken. I think some of those participants wear masks. Are you confident? I guess what kind of caught my eye is that COVID-19 is referenced in just above and just below there, but in that particular instance on page 8, it doesn't say COVID-19 mask. Are you confident that because of the references elsewhere in that legislation that it will be clear enough that a mask for safety purposes would not be subject to this provision?
Sure. I'm pretty confident. I think a technical reading, maybe, and it would require someone to ask for injunctive relief to not have to wear the safety equipment. I'm not sure that it would apply here. In your example, you had referenced the individuals that might be required to wear some sort of safety covering. It would have to be a child that would be required to wear that safety covering, because this would only pertain to children wearing masks or face coverings, not adults.
Okay, so but a student athlete, for example, would be required in school to wear a combination of a helmet and a mask, for example.
I don't think that would apply.
You don't think it's an issue? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman 51st, Second Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman yield for just a couple of questions?
Yes.
I appreciate it. So this has been broached before on prior bills, but would this apply to just COVID-19, or would this prohibition apply in a state of a pandemic for COVID 28, 50 years from now?
COVID-19.
So just solely for COVID-19?
It's my reading.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady in 35th, Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman yield for one question?
Yes.
Two. Okay. Sure. So it says, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, first line. Are we still in a state of emergency?
I'm just kidding. I've got bills and computers, technology. Huh? What about the line? I'm finding it in the
It's not that relevant, actually. Are we still in a state of emergency?
Yep.
Okay, so governor's executive powers still supersede anything we do, correct?
No.
But I mean, if the governor put in a mask mandate, this wouldn't override it?
Yes.
It would?
I think it's possible.
Wouldn't that be contrary to this law?
Would what be contrary? I'm a little confused.
So it
because
says
if you go to page 2.
I'm on page 2.
Okay, line 13. The rights identified under this act shall not be overridden by any elected or appointed official.
But what about notwithstanding any other law to the contrary on line 1?
An order's not a law.
Okay. But emergency powers don't override the law?
Not when it says the language that it has here, it wouldn't.
All right,
I think it was
thanks.
probably crafted to do that very thing, in fact.
I would assume as much. Thank you.
No problem.
Gentleman 16th, Douglas Hornbuckle is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did have a couple questions for the chair, but the gentlelady from Kanawha asked those and they were answered about the emergency powers. I'll be very brief and succinct. During this pandemic, I would like to give credit to Governor Jim Justice, Dr. Clay Marsh, Dr. Hamja. I think they did a great job in doing the color coding of the map. This thing didn't affect all areas the same. Some places at some times were red, orange, gold, or green. And I think with this bill, what we're doing the most is really ignoring our respective districts and accountability on the local health boards. As I talked about in the Education Committee when this bill first came up, I do agree that if there are certain areas that are green, in this instance, for no reason should they have to wear a mask. That's just common sense, and I agree with that. However, when we're dealing with children, as we talk about, that are all around here, if it's in the best interest of not just those children, but making sure that they don't take it back home to their parents, if there's a situation where it is red, and it is imminent that we are going to spread not just the virus, but potentially a lot of death, I think that it should be up to the local school boards, the local health boards, to be able to make that determination, not us. Shouldn't be a blanket, and we have those amendments to try to provide for that, to make sure that everybody is different and they could attain to their own situation. So I would have to respectfully and ask you all to oppose this bill.
Lady in the fourth, Dr. Zukoff, recognized.
Will the chairman yield for a question?
Yes.
Is there anything in this bill that prohibits a school from closing, from a school district from closing a school if they have an outbreak of COVID in their school?
No.
Okay, because that happened in my district. Last May, when we had a change of variant, we had 2 schools, local schools, that were so inundated with COVID that the quarantines weren't working, the masks weren't working, and they had to close the schools for a week to assure that everybody was safe. I just want to make sure that that is still allowed.
Nothing in this bill prohibits that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, may I speak to the bill?
Lady is recognized.
This is a tough one because I'm just as tired of wearing a mask as I wore my mask until the numbers went down and we didn't need it anymore, right? Because I have a 2-year-old granddaughter who has asthma. And if I want to see her when I go home on the weekends, I want to keep her safe. And we want to hope that everybody knows what's best for their own child and their own family, but this was a public health emergency. And we don't know what the future holds. I hope, just like all of you, that we never have to deal with this again, that it's over. But what if it's not? And we tie the hands of our local school boards who are elected just like we are, and also they actually have more representation in my area than we get down here, and our school officials. The main reason that our school put the mask mandate in, and they just lifted it as well as many other counties around the state, was to keep the kids in school, to limit the exposure, to limit the quarantining, because if they had the masks on, then they didn't have to quarantine if they were exposed. Now this takes away all those quarantine options as well, but it worked. It slowed the spread. It stopped the many grandparents that are raising children in our West Virginia society and those elder guardians from becoming sick. I think that it should be up to our local school board and our local public health officials to make those decisions. And I just spoke with my county superintendent this week, and they have developed a spreadsheet for each school to keep track of the kids that are infected so that they know by school. So they have managed to, if there's an outbreak in a school, they could require masks in just that school. We're taking that away. I've heard from numerous folks, many private messages and emails, many more than are against, that are for this bill. I've heard from many people that are against it, but they're afraid to say it in public because of the ridicule that they receive. This is about public safety, and for those reasons, I just don't know that we know enough to say this is what we should be doing right now, the way that this virus has mutated over the last 2 years. I hope that this doesn't cause harm, but I'm not willing to take that chance, and I'll be listening to the folks that I heard from at home and voting no. Thank you.
Gentleman of 43rd, Douglas Thompson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chair yield for a question? Yes. So at my school, where I teach at, we have like a quarantine room. So if a student is showing signs or symptoms of possibly having COVID, we put them in that room. They still continue doing their work, but they're in that room until we can call their parent, and their parent comes and gets them. So the way this language is written, would that be forbidden under this bill?
Well, yes, first off. I'm not sure what or who decides what symptom is qualified to put somebody in a
tummy
different
ache's
room.
one thing, but like, obviously showing COVID signs, sniffly, sneezing, those types of symptoms, not a tummy ache or,
The only way that a student could be required to quarantine under the legislation before you is if they've tested positive for COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. Speak to the bill.
Gentleman is recognized.
So I'll be quite frank and honest with you guys. I'm over masks, totally over it. But at the same facet, removing this option to quarantine a student who is showing signs of having COVID in a school setting, that just doesn't make sense. You want to remove them so that doesn't spread and you don't have to shut your school down. So for that reason, I'll be voting against this bill. Thank you.
The gentleman of 51st, Douglas Hanson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chair yield?
Yes.
Does this bill say anything about a local health department or a county health officer and whether they may have authority to make a decision about masks in schools?
It says nothing about that.
Okay. Do they have the authority to implement a mask mandate in their county in schools?
Right now?
Yes.
I think it's up to the county school boards right now.
Okay, so the county health officer cannot go around the school board and implement the mask mandate in schools. I'm just asking. I don't know the answer to that.
I think the county school boards make the decisions.
Okay.
That's what I'm told.
Okay, that sounds plausible. Okay, then thank you. I think this is a question of science. We all want to get masks off our faces and our kids' faces as soon as possible. We're all tired of this. It's been 2 long years. We're done with it. We want to be done with it. But we have to do it in a way that follows the science. And like the gentleman said a few minutes ago, it's very frustrating that it seems like the goalposts keep getting changed. But that's the nature of science. This is something new. There's new data being collected daily, weekly. We're learning more about this. We know a lot more about it now than we did 2 years ago. And to their credit, the policymakers have adjusted the policy based on the best data and the best information possible. That's the way science works. And I appreciate that they've done that. I think it'd be a mistake to try to legislate science. We need to follow the scientists, follow the science rather than try to legislate it. And I think it'd be much preferable to leave these decisions in the hands of our local elected leaders, the school boards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman 37, Douglas Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman yield? Yes. Thank you. On page 2, I believe section 3, lines 12 and 13, where it says the rights identified under this act shall not be overridden by any elected or appointed official.
Yes.
Would that apply to future legislatures?
No.
It would not?
No.
Okay. How not?
Because
Why not?
Nothing that this legislature can do can prevent a future legislature from acting unless this legislature were to adopt a constitutional amendment, and that constitutional amendment was adopted over in the Senate and put before the voters and adopted by the voters and incorporated in the Constitution. That would prevent further action by this legislature, but nothing that can be written in code can prevent a future legislature from acting.
Okay, so if God forbid things were to get worse, the next session, whoever's here could go back and repeal all of this if they wanted to. Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for yielding. And Mr. Speaker, if I could briefly.
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
Well, I agree with my friend's assessment of that. You can't tie the hands of future legislatures. We also only have regular sessions once a year. And to me, this is about local control and allowing an elected body on the county level, our school boards, who also have to answer to the voters, allowing them more maneuverability if, God forbid, things get worse. Right now, things seem to be getting better. I think if we had a law on the books like this last year, things would not be getting better. If we continued to tie the hands of local health officials and locally elected representatives on the school board. So I'm going to oppose this, and I think that sometimes we ought to think about who we're taking the decisions away from at times. Because I remember 2 years ago very vividly, I was sitting up there, and the gentleman who occupied this seat before me made an amendment to the budget to secure more funding for COVID-19 relief. It was not adopted. It was we were just starting to hear about this disease in February of 2020, I believe. And there was, people were laughing about it. People were saying it was a hoax. Well, obviously it was not. So maybe we ought to think twice before reacting and question some of our decisions here and think about what we're doing here. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 10th, Doug Conley is recognized.
Wasn't planning on saying anything, but thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. I sat here and I listened to all of this, and I don't have a choice but to stand up. You know, we hear about science. What science are you talking about? For every one of you that shows me a scientist or a spreadsheet that says that these masks work, I'll show you a doctor and a scientist and a spreadsheet that'll tell you they don't work. For every one of you that tells me that the vaccines work, I'll show you a doctor, I'll show you a nurse practitioner that tells you they don't work. This is not hardcore science. This is political science. Masks don't work. I just recently performed the eulogy for my aunt. She died of COVID. She was scared to death of COVID, to the point that she wore a mask in her house when she was alone. If she did go out of her house in the car, she was one of those that was in her car with a mask on. She died of COVID. I hear about the numbers would have been greater. Come on, give me a break. The numbers in the last few months showed almost every county in our state red. Why? If the mask worked, if the vaccines worked, why was it so much worse, and why is it just now starting to get better? We have doctors that just last week testified that the masks don't work. We had nurse practitioners that testified masks don't work. This is not taking anything away from the control of the local schools. This is putting the control back where it's supposed to be. It's putting the control and the decision-making back in the hands of the parents and the grandparents. You know, we need to, I've heard 2 or 3 times, we need to stop and think about what we're saying. We need to stop and think about what we're doing. I agree with you 100%. I think if any one of you in here is going to be truthful and you look back at where we have been and where we're at now, this stuff is not working. We have had over 6,000 people in the state of West Virginia that have died from COVID. Guess what? Over 5,000 of them has been since mask and since vaccine mandates. So for those reasons, it's time to put this to bed. It's time to stop. It's time to light that board up green, and let's put these decisions back where they belong. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of 50th, Garcia, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman of Judiciary yield for a few questions, please?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, so first of all, I think earlier there was a question about if there's COVID-22 or some other COVID number in the future, that you don't think that would apply, that this bill would apply to that. Am I correct on your answer there?
That's what I indicated, but if you read on page 1, it could be a virus mutating therefrom.
And that's just what I wanted to clarify. So because we've had the original COVID-19, we've had Delta, we have Omicron, so if there's another variant of that, this would apply to that variant.
That's my understanding, yes.
Whether that variant is more virulent, stronger, more deadly, it would apply to that, correct?
It would apply to a virus mutating from SARS-CoV-2.
Okay. The second question that I have, so what I want to focus on is the quarantine part of what is prohibited. So you can't quarantine somebody under this law, a student, a teacher, unless they have tested positive for COVID-19. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you also can't test somebody for COVID-19 unless somebody is showing symptoms of COVID-19. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, and I brought this up in committee because, you know, my mother's a school teacher, my sister's a school teacher, I have a number of family members that are school teachers that I'd like to make sure are protected. So if there's a family and the mother has COVID, tested positive, the father has COVID, brother has COVID, other brother has COVID, sister has COVID, and you have one other boy or girl who's going to school and they have not tested positive for COVID yet, and they don't have any symptoms yet. This bill would make it where the local school board, number one, could not require a test, and therefore could not require that person to quarantine. But I'll just stop right there. Am I correct on that hypothetical?
Well, I think that your question relies on the premise of the word yet. You're assuming that that person, in fact, has COVID. So are you correct that a student cannot be required to quarantine or isolate unless they've tested positive for COVID-19? Yes. Are you correct that a student cannot be tested for, cannot be required to test unless they are symptomatic? Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And would you agree with me, it's more likely if somebody has been exposed at a household level to COVID-19, they're more likely to get COVID-19 than someone who hasn't been exposed? Would you agree with me that basic premise?
I think that all depends on the dynamic of the household.
If they're in close proximity for more than 15 minutes at a time? That's what we've been told, I think, as legislators when we've been told to isolate.
I mean, I think that comes from the CDC. I've seen conflicting, reports from, medical experts, but am I refuting that? Do you have a higher chance of contracting a communicable disease if you're in close proximity to someone that currently has it? I don't think I can argue against that.
Okay. And I guess finally, you're, in talking about this bill, I mean, do you believe this bill's been put forth because masks don't work?
No.
Okay.
But I think that if you look at, the idea that masks work, I think rests also on the idea that we're wearing the right masks, that we're applying them properly, that we're washing them often. All of these things, I mean, I was just having a discussion with a doctor, and I was talking about when they apply their masks and their PPE, do they get handed that in med school and say, hey, put this on? I said, no, there's a whole class on it. There are training courses about how to wear it, how to apply it. So if all of these kids were properly wearing the right type of things, is it possible? Sure, it's possible. But I don't think the purpose of this bill is to put forth some suggestion that masks don't work. But I think that there's plenty of evidence out there that shows that the viral load is so low in children that it's not even a proven vector. We don't know what the psychological impact on our children are. I think these are all of the issues, and the totality of the circumstance is telling us that this is the way that West Virginia wants to go.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill.
The gentleman is recognized.
Okay. So the biggest fear that I have for this bill is that although things may be getting better right now, things could take a turn for the worse in the future, and this really is taking away control locally to be able to fight if there is a more deadly variant. And that's possible. That's possible, and this would apply to that. Again, I've got a number of family members who are teachers, and what strikes at me the most really is the quarantine provision, more so than the mask provision, because the quarantine provision provides that if somebody's very likely to have the COVID virus, that a school can't take the necessary action to protect the teachers and the other students who are going into the classroom if it's likely they're infected. Because if a family is against having their children tested, then there's no way to know. If they're not symptomatic, then there's no reason under this law where the school can say this individual needs to quarantine, whether it's a student or whether it's an employee. And again, that takes the control out of the people's hands who are responsible for that safety and control at a local level. And I think that really inhibits what we can do and how we can effectively try to get around what's happened. The last thing that I'll say is, we have a bunch of young people here today, and honestly, I'm a little bit embarrassed. The whole idea of a statement that masks do not work. I understand that people are tired of masks, but that's just not true. And to have this political conspiracy theory floated on the floor is really embarrassing. So I apologize for that. So I'm not going to vote for this bill. I think it's got some issues. I think local control is what should be the controlling value of the day and not what people here in Charleston think. Thank you.
The gentleman 19th, Doug Griffith, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good grief. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there further debate on the bill? If not, Chair recognizes the gentleman 28th, Doug Maynard, to close debate on the bill.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I rise briefly today in support of this bill. It's my bill. All across the country, we've seen measures adopted just like this bill in a bipartisan fashion, a bipartisan basis. And I think it's time that we do the same here in the state of West Virginia. Teachers and constituents in my district brought this to me. They told me, they said, Jordan, we're having a hard time teaching what we need to teach with these masks on. Our students are not learning as well with these masks on. And quite frankly, they told me, it's pretty hypocritical that we're letting folks tackle each other on the football field, box each other out in a basketball court, and let fans roam the stands with no masks on at school events. They looked at me and they told me, somebody has to do something about this. And so I wrote the bill. The gentleman from the 35th took the words out of my mouth today so eloquently and covered a lot of what I wanted to say today. The one thing I did want to address just briefly is the argument of local control, because we keep hearing that over and over again in this argument and in this debate. So I just want to speak briefly to that. The essence of local control is to make sure that large governments don't come in and take the freedoms and choices away from the people. And unfortunately, through this pandemic, over and over again, we have seen those mandates implemented and those choices and powers taken away from individuals and from parents. And so, the question is not, why are we taking away local control? I reject the premise of the question. The real question that I have is, why did local governments take control away from parents and individuals to make these choices for themselves? Much like the health department bills we've passed late last year, this bill simply course corrects from the overreach and mandates that our governments have imposed. Folks, look around this room. Look up in the rafters. Look at your neighbors beside of you. Every single one of us in this chamber have the choice and freedom as to whether we were going to mask up today, and some people made that choice and some people did not. My entire premise is this: if the choice and freedom is good enough for each and every one of us in this chamber, then it should be good enough for our parents, for our educators, and our school personnel going forward. And that's why I rise today, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it, and I urge passage. Thank you.
For the House, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine.
The following members have paired: Delegate Hott, yea. Delegate Pushkin, nay. Delegate Pinson, yea. Delegate Hornbuckle, nay.
Has every member voted? Clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 80 ayes, 16 nays, and 4 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4071, mask and quarantine option for parents and faculty.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4285, relating to real estate appraiser licensing board requirements.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Gentleman the 29th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to clarify policies and procedures relating to board operations and licensure qualification. First, the bill prohibits any person serving as an expert witness to also participate in any disciplinary proceeding against a licensee, including making any votes. Second, the bill requires the board provide guidance to applicants on the uniform states of professional appraisal practice, to ensure persons submitting appraisals are provided ample time to learn the process correctly. The applicant has 60 days to make the required corrections. Finally, the bill removes rulemaking associated with the USPAP standards because these are national standards that are changed frequently. The board can better communicate the necessary updates to its licensees and applicants faster than the current rulemaking process. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 94 ayes, 0 nays, and 6 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4285 relating to real estate appraiser licensing board requirements.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4317 relating to health insurance for living organ donors.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 17th District Rohrbach to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This bill prohibits a health insurance company from using the fact a person is an organ donor when calculating his or her premiums. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4317 relating to health insurance for living organ donors.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4377 to update the involuntary commitment process.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman from the 17th District Rohrbach to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. I ask your indulgence because this is a rather long, lengthy bill, and it does a lot of things. This bill seeks to update the involuntary commitment process. This issue was studied by the Joint Committee on Health and Human Resources during the 2021 interims on 2 separate occasions. During that time, the committee heard or received testimony from DHHR, behavioral health centers, sheriffs, hospitals, and the state Supreme Court. This bill seeks to do a number of things. This bill sets time frames for the processes to adhere to. It expands from the sheriff to all law enforcement to be able to carry out the duties of this article. It requires the Mental Hygiene Commissioner to order which primary law enforcement agency and jurisdiction shall be in charge of transportation. The Mental Hygiene Commissioner shall consider requests for alternative transportation providers and, if determined to be appropriate, order such. An alternative transportation provider includes a facility, agency, community mental health service provider, or other transportation provider with trained personnel. It requires an evaluation to be conducted in person. It, however, permits an evaluation if an in-person evaluation would create a substantial delay to the resolution of the matter. A telehealth evaluation can be performed. The bill permits Cabell County, the Supreme Court, mental health facilities, law enforcement, and the DHHR to enter into a pilot project concerning the involuntary commitment process. It requires a person to have direct and specific knowledge that a person is mentally ill or has a substance use issue which would make that person likely to harm himself or others. Final commitment shall be based on clear and convincing evidence. If alternative transportation is used, it shall be paid for by the DHHR. If a state hospital lacks capacity, the individual will be sent to a diversion facility as designated by the chief medical officer of the state hospital. The state hospital shall identify the diversion facility within 2 hours of receiving the order. That's a summary of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman from the 36th District row is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the chair would answer some questions, this is a big bill, and it's a very important bill.
To the gentleman, gladly.
Thank you. I've had some discussions with my local sheriff, and there are difficulties in the transportation. It's my understanding as I read the bill that is there an intent to fix some of those problems so that transportation becomes a part of the process more than just driving a patient to a hospital?
No, the gentleman is absolutely correct. This is really, I'll digress just a second in answering your question. This is a process that actually, this bill's been in the works for about 3 years. And we were finally able to get a product together. And one of the big problems is, I'll use, for instance, your local sheriff in your county. Right now, the whole process is strictly sheriff-driven.
Yes.
And we are trying to give some alternatives to alleviate some of the demands placed on our sheriffs and to spread the burden out a bit, and to allow even some non-law enforcement transportation by trained individuals.
So, and I understand that some sheriffs have had to spend as many as 14 hours with the patient, and that they sometimes have to make calls to institutions to find out if they have room, and they're told no, then they have to find some other institution to take them to. And it's been sort of a gap in services where the sheriff's department has to provide custody and care of the person just because there's not a good plan in place. But this bill is intended to correct that?
There's no question this bill's intended to correct that. The gentleman's right, is right now it's, I don't want to use the term stuck, but the sheriff, if they can't get the placement in a timely fashion, then they still have possession of this person. Right. And we've even heard reports of individuals being placed in the regional jail system simply for holding over a weekend. That's not where mentally ill people that are a risk to themselves or others need to be placed. They need to be placed in adequate mental health facilities.
Now, the Supreme Court's referred to several times, I think, in the bill. And is that for a pilot program? Or what would be their role in this process? The
pilot program, and I probably shouldn't be the one to present this part because as the members of this chamber know, I do represent Cabell and Wayne counties. The reason Cabell was taken is to set up a pilot. As we all agree, this situation needs to work better. But when the committee heard testimony, without question, there are more facilities in Cabell County than any other county in this state. You've got 2 large hospitals, one of which has an inpatient psychiatric facility. You have one of our 2 state psychiatric facilities. You also have a private, totally psychiatric hospital. So you have the clearance capabilities at the 2 hospitals. You have a residency program in psychiatry at the university there through the medical school. And you have not 1, not 2, but 3 psychiatric facilities. So as we look to go even forward with making this process better, there's not a better place in the state than Cabell to figure it out, because if we can't make it work there, there's no way we can make it work.
Yeah. Thank you. If I may speak to the bill very briefly.
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this is a real problem, and this bill is, I think, a step forward, but I doubt that we're going to be finished with it because we really need to have transportation and services provided hand in hand. And so I'm supporting the bill, but I think we do need to look at other alternatives to improve this, and particularly the pilot program, I think, as described by the chair, is reason for cheer about this issue. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman 37th, Douglas Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the legislation, and would briefly thank the committee, the chair, vice chair, and the committee and the staff for working with so many different of the parties involved to come up with this bill that does address part of the issue. And I'd agree with my friend from Kanawha that said this is a first step, but it's something we need to continue to work on. While this goes a long way in addressing the issues that the sheriffs had with transportation and streamlines the process a bit, I think we really need to at some point look at what happens after the commitment. And there was a public hearing yesterday morning where we talked about some of the issues that are going on in Charleston, and there's a mental health crisis going on in this state. So while this bill addresses part of the problem, like I said, we need to address what happens after the commitment and why folks are being released from Bateman and from Sharps so quickly. And as soon as someone is committed that really needs help and shouldn't be taking up time and space in a regional jail, they're too often within a few weeks they're back here in Charleston or they're back in Huntington without really getting adequate care. I think the state should be less concerned with selling off the state hospitals and more concerned about the treatment and care they're giving people inside our state hospitals. That's the problem, and we really need to work together soon to address this issue. It is at a crisis level in this state. Like I said, this is a good first step, but we really need to look at this. Thank you.
The gentleman at 20th, Brown, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to start by saying I support this bill, and I thank the Chairman of Health for running this bill and the committee working on it. Last summer or the summer before, I can't particularly recall, but the delegate from the 17th and I had a phone conversation over the summer. We generally discuss issues with transportation and involuntary commitment, or what is more commonly known as the mental hygiene process. As an assistant prosecuting attorney for Meade County for the last 8 years, I can tell you the transportation issue for our sheriff's department is a big issue. From a practical standpoint, you will have deputy sheriffs transporting these involuntarily committed persons, mostly at night, and then expected to come out and work their shift during the day. So anything we can do to maybe give that subset of employees or county employees some type of relief is well worth it. I support the bill, and again, I thank you for running the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the bill? If not, Gentleman 17th to close debate on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be very brief, but I would like to thank all the stakeholders. I would truly say over the last 3 years, particularly the last year, this committee's probably spent as much time on this bill as any bill we've run. It is a terribly complex issue, and as the gentleman from Kanawha stated, we are at a crisis in this state with mental health. That goes without saying. So I applaud the members of the committee and our staff, and this is a complex problem. This is a starting point. Ultimately, I see several more things. I'd like to get to about 6 regional centers where we can actually have some clearance facilities so our local law enforcement can be even alleviated of some of those duties. But this is a start, and I urge the members to adopt this bill, and as we continue to work through the process with our Senate colleagues, we'll see if we can't get this passed into law, get the pilots up and going, get the changes of the bill up and going, and we'll move forward and make changes as need be, because this is an urgent, pressing matter that this legislature I applaud for taking up this year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and urge passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 94 ayes, 0 nays, and 6 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4377 to update the involuntary commitment process.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4393 to increase the managed care tax if the managed care organization receives a rate increase.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman 64th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill would amend the section of code that imposes a provider tax on health maintenance organizations. The bill ensures that as the Medicaid rate increases for managed care, organizations are paid for by increasing in the provider tax. That's the summary of the bill. I urge passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 87 ayes, 8 nays, and 5 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4393 to increase the managed care tax if the managed care organization receives a rate increase.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4441, creating a Class M air rifle stamp.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman of the 29th to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of this bill is to create a Class M for state residents and a Class MM for non-residents air rifle stamp to hunt big game and small game as otherwise permitted by law. The bill sets the price for the stamp at $8 and outlines the criteria for caliber and permitted uses for these weapons. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4441, creating a Class M air rifle stamp.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In order for this to pertain to spring gobbler season, I move the bill take effect for passage.
The question before the House is the motion that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of the motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, the chair notes it is 11 o'clock, the normal hour for convening of the House. Chair's informed that there are members who have guests that have arrived today for introductions. Are there objections to pausing briefly for introductions? No objections are heard. Gentleman number 30th, Douglas Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise on Fat Tuesday on the eve of Lent on behalf of myself and Delegate Steele, the fit and firm chairman of GovOrg, to welcome some visitors from the West Virginia Academy of Nutrition and Dietitians. So today in the South Gallery, we have folks from CAMC, Marshall, WVU, Ruby, Health Right and the Dairy Council, and we have some interns here from Marshall's graduate program. If they would stand in the House, make them feel welcome, please. Lady from the 3rd, Douglas Storage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Delegate Fluharty, Reynolds, Zukoff, and myself are pleased to have with us this morning the 8th grade class from Our Lady of Peace. They're escorted by their teacher, Renee Schneid, and my sister-in-law, Miss Maureen Kerr. I'd ask them to stand in the House. Please make them welcome.
Gentleman 27th, Douglas Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce that we have one of our former members here on the floor, Delegate Josh Higginbotham. Chamber will make it feel welcome.
Gentleman 27th, Douglas Gearhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask unanimous consent for the remarks from the gentleman of the 28th regarding Bill 4071 be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Are there objections? Okay, no objections are heard. That'll be so ordered. Gentleman from 35th, Douglas Scaff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for a brief introduction. I noticed a lot of active and retired coal miners in our galleries today. We talk so much down here, and you do so much to keep the lights on, and we just want to take a moment to recognize all you do. Thank you for being here.
Gentleman of third, like a Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the comments from the gentleman from the 10th on House Bill 4071 be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Are there objections? No objections are heard. Are there further introductions at this time? If not, next bill on third reading.
House Bill 4450, removing the 50-cent fee charged and deposited in the combined voter registration and driver's licensing fund for each driver's license issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, Gentleman 16th, Doug Linville to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill does exactly what the short title says. It removes a 50-cent fee charged and deposited in the combined voters registration and driver's licensing fund for each driver's license issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I do urge passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Gentleman third, like a Fluharty, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will gentleman yield?
Of course.
What is this fund used for?
This fund is used for the administration of the motor voter procedure.
So automatic voter registration?
Yes.
What else?
It's simply used by the Secretary of State to communicate the voters registrations process through DMV to the county clerks.
So it relates to the combined voter registration and driver licensing fund, right? That's what we're talking about here?
That's correct.
And are you essentially just eliminating that fund?
We eliminate the fee charged for the fund, which amounts to $125,000 a year in state revenues. However, the testimony that we heard in finance was that the total cost, because much of this is moved to electronic, is roughly $3,000 a year in postage, and the Secretary of State can handle that through other special revenue funds at his disposal.
But that's related to the DMV, right?
This fund, if you look at the two fiscal notes, it does not actually go into the DMV whatsoever. It goes into a fund for the Secretary of State. The net reduction annually to the Secretary of State is $125,000 pursuant to the fiscal note. The net reduction to the DMV is $0.
So yeah, it says that, let me pull it up. I was reading the fiscal note, and it refers to the DMV in the fiscal note, I believe. But at the same time, the fund itself, it goes to things like reimbursing state agencies for voter registration services, right?
My understanding is the only purpose of this fund, pursuant to testimony from Donald Kersey in the Committee on Finance, was simply for expenses of the Secretary of State to transmit these registrations to the county clerks.
Have you reviewed the actual fund that we're eliminating?
I've reviewed the name of the fund, but again, this is a very simple bill. All it simply does is strike, provided that notwithstanding any provisions of this code to the contrary, 50 cents of every license fee paid pursuant to the provisions of subdivision 2, subsection A, section 8, article 2, chapter 17B of this code shall be paid to the special fund established pursuant to the provisions of subsection A, section 12, article 2, chapter 3 of this code. That's all this does.
Okay, yeah, that's section 3212 is what I'm asking about. All right, obviously you haven't had time to review that. Thanks for yielding. Very briefly, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman is recognized.
I think it goes a little beyond what's on the surface here. The actual fund we're talking about reimburses state agencies for voter registration costs and then involved with the process that they have in place, and that includes purchase, printing, distribution of public information related to voter registration. I mean, I don't know about you guys. There's a lot of you over there. If people getting registered, they're probably going to vote for you anyway. So maybe I should vote for this. But you know, I think it goes beyond the surface on this, and I'll be voting no. Thank you.
The gentleman is 66, Doug Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the chairman continue to you?
Certainly.
Thank you to my colleague for yielding. Just to follow up a little bit on the line of questioning of our colleague from the third, this legislation was requested by the Secretary of State's office.
That is correct.
And so the Secretary of State's office essentially has indicated that they have ample funds without this additional fee on those folks, you know, getting their driver's license to fund the purposes that that the fee was, I guess, initially intended to cover.
Yes, as the gentleman will recall, the Secretary of State's General Counsel testified to us that they had more than enough money to effectuate the mandate in law, and that we just didn't need to take an extra 50 cents from every West Virginian when they renew their driver's license.
Thank you for yielding. Mr. Speaker, as sponsor of this legislation, I certainly urge passage of the bill. It really comes down to a question of whether we want to continue to impose a fee on our constituents when the agency has made very clear that they have ample resources in order to cover the provisions, you know, of this program. So if you want to eliminate a fee that's no longer needed, I would urge you to vote green. If you'd like to continue to impose a fee on your constituents that is no longer needed, then I would vote red. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from 51st, like a flesh hour, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill, and I think it's important to look carefully at what this bill does. One of the things what it does is two things. It prevents voter fraud and provides resources for that, and also it makes voter registration through the DMV easier. And it's only $125,000, and I think if you want to make sure that we prevent voter fraud, you ought to look at this a little more carefully. For example, it deals with the payment of dues associated with transferring data to and from other states. I personally think that's kind of important. It also deals with printing and distribution of mail voter registration forms. It deals with reimbursing our clerks when they have to verify voter registration and send out that several different postcards to people. And I know that our county clerks are concerned about these costs. It also deals with implementation of the National Voter Registration Act. Part of what we need to do is make sure we don't have fraud by implementing that statute properly. It deals with efforts to maintain correct voter information and conduct general list maintenance to remove ineligible voters and ensure new residents receive voter registration information, including collaborating with other states and nonprofit corporations dedicated to improving the election system. If you want to make sure that we continue to try to prevent fraud, voter fraud, and make it easier for people to vote, then you will oppose this bill.
Question again before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, does the gentleman from 16th wish to close debate on the bill?
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Sometimes we get off on tangents in this building, and yesterday I made a comment that we were arguing the absurd. I think that's what we've got here in this bill. Some of the argument that has been made. It really boils down to this, and we have members of the minority on the Finance Committee that were here when this bill was taken up. I believe it passed unanimously on a voice vote out of the Finance Committee in bipartisan fashion. It's very simple. The Secretary of State and his representatives both asked for this bill and testified that we have plenty of money to be able to effectuate this bill. So the real question becomes, do you want to keep nickeling and diming your constituents or not? Take the 50-cent fee off, reduce some people's taxes and fees, and we'll have more opportunities the remainder of the day. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 86 ayes, 8 nays, and 6 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 4450, removing the 50-cent fee charged and deposited in the combined voter registration and driver's licensing fund for each driver's license issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be in the remainder of the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect July 1st, 2022.
The question before the House is the motion that the bill be made effective July 1st, 2022. Those in favor of that motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 93 ayes, 1 nay, and 6 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill effective July 1st, 2022. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4466 relating to school building authorities' review of school bond applications.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman of the 10th, Doug Chris, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. This bill would require county boards of education to, 1, submit a request to the executive director of the school building authority at least 9 months prior to the county's proposed bond election, and after initial consultation with the director, 2, prepare a written outline of the bond finance plan, the capital improvements to be made with the levy funds, and the amount and the timing of funding requested from the authority. And then 3, present its request at a meeting of the members of the authority. All if the county board wants the SBA to serve as a part of the county's finance plan for a proposed capital improvement levy to be submitted to the voters for that county. The bill then states if the county intends to use financial support from the authority as part of its bond funding plan, the county may not proceed with the bond election without first obtaining initial approval of the SBA. The bill then states that grants of the SBA finance assistance are contingent upon the passage of the bond levy election and the final approval of the boards, the SBA, and the county's project and financial plan. The bill also states that materials produced by the county or its board of education that refer to the school building authority shall include a statement of this contingency and terms, and that upon passage of the bond levy, the school board shall have 4 years to finalize the project. I urge passage.
The question before the House is shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman of 34th, Doug Boggs, is recognized.
Gentleman yield.
Yes, sir, to my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, my friend, the Vice Chair of Finance. There was some debate on this, and we talked about it in committee. And could you walk me through how this works now with SBA now versus what would happen as a result of this bill?
I think it's 2 independent operations. For instance, in my own county, right now, they are proposing a bond levy to be on the May election. And in a lot of counties, they may independently decide to do a bond levy and then go to the authority, or they may go to the authority first and determine if they can get some money, then put something on the ballot for the counties to decide and not coordinate the two. All this is asking is they try to sync up ahead of time, one, so that the SBA will know that they're out there trying to do this, so they can try to make arrangements down the road. And that's why the 4 years are in there, because as we all know, there's never enough money every time the SBA meets that they have enough funds to go around. So it gives the ability for the counties to be able to hold their bond levy in coordination with the SBA.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up the 4-year issue, because I think that is important to have a little bit bigger window to have the opportunity to move some of these projects forward that obviously aren't as simple as just, starting construction.
Right.
But the one sticking point that I had was, does this in any way constitute having to get some kind of a pre-approval for a project, even to apply for a project, without somehow the SBA's blessing?
If you're going to try, according to this bill, if you try to use the SBA, you're going to have to talk to them ahead of time. If you're going to go with using a bond levy and them.
I know that there was some talk about the possibility of an amendment on the floor to this bill, but I think that maybe didn't occur. Is that something that's contemplated in the Senate, or do you know of anything that's going to change in this?
No, sir, I do not.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question again before the House: shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Does the gentleman wish to close debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 91 ayes, 3 nays, and 6 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4466 relating to school building authorities' review of school bond applications.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4499 relating to making the procurement process more efficient by modifying and updating outdated processes and requirements.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman, 32nd Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 4499 is intended to modernize and update the operations of the Purchasing Division to encourage earlier communication with purchasing agencies and to aid purchasing agencies from experts within the division regarding the manner and process of their procurement. The bill increases the thresholds under which agencies can purchase commodities, permitting the director to delegate procurement limits for commodities $25,000 or less to the agency to purchase on their own. Purchasing currently operates an inspection and compliance system that tracks how well agencies comply with the purchasing laws of the state, and as an agency becomes more comfortable operating in the purchasing environment, the director may increase the agency's delegated procurement authority to an amount up to $100,000. The bill also eliminates duplicative paperwork. That is a summary, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 90 ayes, 4 nays, and 6 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4499 relating to making the procurement process more efficient by modifying and updating outdated processes and requirements.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4502 establishing the Build WV Act.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, gentleman, the 64th Douglas Householder to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill would create a new article of code to establish the Build West Virginia Act, which is designed to provide housing for graduate, postgraduate, and professional job holders, technical workers, and entrepreneurs for targeted businesses in key geographical regions of the state. This new program would be administered by the West Virginia Department of Economic Development, which would designate certified Build West Virginia districts. It would certify building projects within those districts for construction of residential housing, including new construction or the rehabilitation of existing unoccupied structures, and designate approved companies to build those projects. Those approved would receive an exemption from the state and municipal sales taxes for purchases used in the projects, as well as a special property value adjustment tax credit against the approved company's state income taxes. The credit is calculated as follows: the approved company's approved cost incurred for the project times 60% times the statewide average Class 3 property tax rate of the state for the tax year in which the construction of the project property is completed times 10. The amount of the credit shall be applied annually in the amount of 1/10 thereof per year for a period of 10 consecutive years, beginning in the tax year in which the construction of project property is completed. The projects must be built in no more than 12 certified Build West Virginia districts that may be designated upon the agreement in writing of the following officials: the Secretary of the Department of Economic Development, the Secretary of the Department of Tourism, and the Secretary of the Department of Commerce. This is an explanation of the bill. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman at 36, Douglas Rowe, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've come all the way around on this bill. I wasn't sure about it. I thought one more tax credit, but I'm completely in support of the bill. What it will do is allow us in 12 different areas in the state to establish a program for tax credits where there will be housing built that will accommodate the needs of certain areas. Now, it's not just housing as subdivision development for Nucor out in Mason County. It also can be in Fayette County and Kanawha County for housing along the Kanawha River and the New River. And what it means is that we could have, and the housing can be multi-family, it can be hotels, it can be any sort of development that provides housing. And we know that if we provide moderate cost housing, which is the idea of this, then when folks move out of that housing, then that creates housing for more low-income folks. So generally, you're going to see an increase in the housing stock, and it's going to be a tremendous boon, I think, if we can get a district in Kanawha County, because they're 20 miles wide, and between Charleston and Montgomery is just a bit over 20 miles. So we could have the entire region of East Kanawha County developed into a tourist destination that will connect Charleston to what's the boom in Fayette County now for the new national park. So what we can do in Kanawha is, and there's already a plan in place to have us have ATV trails on the ridge tops in East Kanawha County. Hatfield-McCoy already has in place a trail system ready to go into East Kanawha County. And all this is designed to connect Charleston to the boom that's happening in Fayette County. And it's a tourism development, and I think that this is a key part of that, and so I really encourage the members to vote in favor of the bill. I should point out that the tax credits are on state taxes, not on local taxes, except perhaps a B&O tax on municipalities, but it's not, the ad valorem property tax for the counties is not affected by this. So again, 12 regions of the state, and it's to go in where, and there's a list of, I think it's page 17, a whole list of the things that the Economic Development Department is supposed to determine in selecting where those districts would be. But I think that this is really a forward-looking bill, and I encourage the members to vote in favor of it.
The gentleman at 15th, Douglas Foster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Request for Rule 49, given the circumstances explained before the running of this bill.
Yes, sir. As under the set of facts relayed to the chair by the gentleman at 15th, Douglas Foster, it would be the ruling of the chair that the gentleman would belong to a class of greater than 5 individuals similarly impacted by the bill, and therefore would be directed to vote on the question. The gentleman at 34th, Douglas Boggs.
Whoa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and sorry about that. Rise in support of the bill. I think it's got this is an opportunity, I think, that we've needed for a long time. And I'm going to just back up just a little bit. And the first year I was elected, the federal prison was built over in Gilmer County. And, you know, obviously that was a lot of jobs. People were ecstatic about, you know, the opportunities that were coming into the area. But one thing that the area wasn't prepared for was housing. And a lot of people moved in or came in, looked around, could not find suitable housing. So they didn't remain in Gilmer County. They didn't remain on that Route 5 corridor between Glenville and Burnsville in the Braxton-Gilmer County area. Many of them went to Bridgeport. Many of them went to, you know, a long way away because of the housing issue. Something like this could have been very, very helpful and beneficial back then. And then a look at the tourism aspects are almost limitless. I think the only concern I have is we need to make sure that this gets spread around. We need the Development Office and the Secretary of Tourism. We need to be making sure that we continue to look at projects in the areas of the state that are hemorrhaging population, that have opportunities to grow and to prosper, and this will be a great way to do that. So while I know that there's needs in many of the areas that have been mentioned, we have a lot of areas that need help, and this would be a great help along with some projects to go along with it. So I support the legislation, urge you to vote green.
Gentleman from the first.
Hey, will the chairman of the finance please yield real quick? Who determines when a said district is certified under the provisions of this bill?
It's three people. It's Secretary of Tourism, Department of Commerce, and the Department of Economic Development. Those three set up and determine the 12 districts.
So there's 12 districts. Do we know where those 12?
No more than 12. No more
than 12?
Yeah.
So we got this central committee that's going to establish some sort of plan for these districts, and they have all the information necessary in their minds to determine which ones are certified and which ones aren't.
Gentleman's correct.
Where we should build houses and where we shouldn't.
Gentleman's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Lady in the fourth, Dr. Zukoff's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also stand in support of this bill, but I want to caution us that this bill alone isn't going to develop the housing. Infrastructure costs to develop housing are significant. We've got another option before us with all the infrastructure money that's about to come into the state, and I would suggest that folks also look at putting some of the infrastructure money towards these development sites, because it's extremely, extremely expensive, and it won't happen by itself with just the tax credits that we're providing. I also hope that we take a look at maybe building some workforce housing along with these middle-income housing, so we're truly creating diverse neighborhoods as it's supposed to be. So for those reasons, I'm supporting this legislation. Thank you.
Lady in the 48th, Dr. Kimball's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chair of Finance please yield for a question?
Yes.
Is this credit for all developers, housing developers, or builders in the state?
No, it's only those participating in the up to the district, the 12.
And that have gone through the process. So
Exactly,
not everybody
yes.
not
correct.
everybody will benefit.
Generally, he's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. When I first heard about this bill, I just decided to sit down and to write a few notes, so bear with me. These are the reasons that I oppose this bill, and these are the reasons I oppose many of the other economic development, incentive, tax forgiveness type bills of this nature. First of all, this bill assumes that the free market won't provide housing. I don't think that's the case. It also assumes that the Secretaries of Tourism, Economic Development, and Commerce have the ability to determine where market needs for additional housing will develop. Builders and investors are best suited to determine where to risk investment in new housing, not government officials. New housing construction in an area not considered one of these certified districts will not get the same tax-saving benefits. This plan is likely to have the unintended consequence of diverting housing investment away from areas where the market would otherwise have supplied it, due to the tax incentives this bill offers. In other words, it is foreseeable that this bill will inadvertently create housing shortages in areas not subject to the special tax treatment it offers. While tax cuts are great, so long as we don't jeopardize our ability to make budget, not all tax cuts are created equal. Government shouldn't set up tax policy that will obviously favor some over others identically situated, especially when government is directly involved in picking and choosing who will qualify over time. To the extent that any of the tax savings recognized by participating developers are passed through to buyers or renters in the form of lower rent or lower purchase prices, it's unfair and not based on any rational government interest that government should set up a policy of artificially reducing the cost of housing for some and not for others. Tax policy should be set so that the public can decide without any further involvement of government whether to structure business decisions so as to have a predetermined tax consequence. Here, the public cannot do that because whether any individual business can take advantage of the credits will still depend on government review and approval. It's unfair to West Virginia taxpayers to shoulder the burden of funding government to the exclusion of any particular business government chooses to benefit from these tax breaks. These are just some of the reasons that I will be voting no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question before the House: shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman at 36, second row, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to add that this is one piece of the puzzle that we need that goes with the Coalfield Community Development bill that we've already passed, and also the infrastructure, the Water Development Authority's grant match program that we've already passed. There are billions of federal dollars waiting for us to come and use them to rebuild our coalfield communities and to rebuild our infrastructure. The fact that this bill and other bills will direct some development into the areas of greatest need is a good thing. It's going to be, I think that housing is the last thing to get going whenever you have an economic boom. This is going to have the housing be one of the leaders for that economic boom. People have to have some place to live. They've got to have some place to stay, camp, and generally recreate. And this bill is one more piece in the puzzle that's presented by the economic development folks and the folks in tourism. I think it's an excellent bill and a great opportunity for us, particularly when we see that a 20% match on a federal grant can produce another, perhaps $1 billion. If we can come up with match money of, say, $200 million, we're looking at a $1.2 billion possibility for with federal grants. We're poised, the leadership and the members of this body have endorsed bills that will let us be in position for that kind of economic development. And I think this is just one more piece in that puzzle. Thank you.
Is there debate on the bill? If not, does the gentleman from Seaforth wish to close debate on the bill? If not, the question before the House: shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 81 ayes, 14 nays, and 5 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4502, establishing the Build WV Act.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4511 to make numerous amendments to modernize and increase efficiencies in the administration of the West Virginia Unclaimed Property Act.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman 32nd, Douglas Fast, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill deals primarily with the Unclaimed Property Act and also ties into the Nursing Home Act. This bill amends the Nursing Home Act to make it easier for survivors or estates to obtain release of a decedent's personal account held by a nursing home and deeming such account assets abandoned if not claimed in 150 days. As to the Unclaimed Property Act, the bill updates the act regarding new technology, including defining virtual currency and its abandonment, liquidation, reporting, and remittance to the state treasurer. It adjusts presumed abandoned times to streamline the process. It amends provisions relating to unclaimed safety deposit box assets, continues the Unclaimed Property Fund, providing for management and investment of funds therein, and to an annual transfer of $1 million to the Jumpstart Savings Trust Fund. It increases transparency in the Treasurer's Office data reporting and requires publication of an annual unclaimed property report. That is a summary. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4511 to make numerous amendments to modernize and increase efficiencies in the administration of the West Virginia Unclaimed Property Act.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4553 to clarify the application of zoning requirements to exempt wholesale generators.
Ladies and gentlemen, this bill was advanced to third reading yesterday with a number of amendments pending. Chair will ask the clerk to please report the first of the pending amendments.
Delegate B. Ward moves to amend the bill. On page 5, section 2, line 116, immediately following the word code, by striking the period and inserting the following: provided that an exempt wholesale generator does not mean and shall not include any entity using wind power to generate electricity.
The question before the House is the amendment just read by the clerk. Is there debate on the amendment? Gentleman 55th, Delegate Ward is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fellow delegates, I bring before you the amendment for your consideration so that I can make you aware of what this bill will do if it passes as currently exists. I'm making you aware that this bill will allow a wind turbine site to locate adjacent to a thriving, successful subdivision in Hardy County. The proposed site has been zoned residential for many years. I'm not going to delve into what may or may not do to wildlife, such as the bald eagle, but also noise and other matters. This issue is about the integrity of our county zoning regulations and perhaps yours too. In my county, our zoning is designed to protect residential, industrial, commercial, and agricultural interests so they can be confident in the protection that sensible planning affords them. Our Meadow Hills subdivision is 1,000 acres with 70 lots, 29 homes, some under construction. The subdivision road on the eastern portion goes 1.3 miles along the proposed wind turbine site. In numerous places, the proposed site is 20 to 175 feet from the road. One home under construction in that area is less than 100 feet from the proposed site, and the owner has spent approximately $750,000 thus far. Another home in the $500,000 range, the project site is 20 feet from the adjacent road to their lot. Cove Creek is another subdivision, nearly 30 lots and 11 homes. Hardy County has done exactly what our state has suggested we do: get reasonable people to develop sensible guidelines so that individuals and businesses can come here, invest their resources, and be confident our guidelines will protect them from undesirable or prohibited development. We have encouraged folks to come to Hardy County and enjoy the peace, tranquility, and scenic views that they can experience here. We have many retirees and others who have built primary and secondary homes that have added considerable value to our tax base. We are a critical destination for people from the Washington, D.C. area for second homes and tourism. This bill flies in the face of what our county has accomplished over the past 15 years. I appeal to your good judgment. Have we misled the individual who believed that a residential area was going to remain that way? How would you feel if you built your dream home, $100,000, $500,000, or $1 million, in a residential area, and just beyond your backyard you find 600 feet turbines placed upon land zoned residential for many years? An editorial written by an Invenergy representative said that jobs will be created. This is true. However, he did not point out that jobs are lost when some people have decided not to buy a lot and to build a home there because they do not trust our state officials to abide by reasonable, established guidelines. To their credit, our Planning Commission and county commissioners opposed this project and this bill and its potential incursion of wind turbines upon a residential site. He mentions the revenue it will bring to Hardy County Board of Education. This is also true. However, what about the reduced value on nearby homes and potential value of lots and homes that will be more difficult for some realtors to sell? He refutes the assertion and says some studies show that they have increased. Perhaps some have, but I'm skeptical that it would be a net gain. Very important part of our future. We understand and appreciate that. As for wind turbine sites, they are a viable source of energy. However, there are places they should not be. I appeal to your good judgment. Do you really want a 600-foot wind turbine next to an established, well-maintained subdivision with valuable homes therein? Do you want wind turbines encroaching upon land zoned residential by competent local officials? What sort of message are we sending when existing zoning guidelines are changed and disregarded that people have trusted us to protect them and their investments here in Hardy County? This is a precedent we do not want to establish. This bill would allow a Chicago company like Invenergy to come to your county, find real estate zoned residential that suits their purpose, and there isn't much you could do to prevent that. I urge you to join with me. Let's fix this and make things right. My amendment does that. Wind turbines will not be exempt from local zoning guidelines. I urge adoption of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of the 65th, Doug Clark, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permission to speak to the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
Delegate Ward and myself have worked on this project for quite so many weeks. Although the overall intent of the bill is for all energy wholesale generators, speaking with Delegate Ward and his amendment, I do not oppose his amendment. I see the situation that he's in, and I would ask everybody to adopt his amendment on this bill.
Question again before the House now is the adoption of the amendment as read by the clerk. Is there debate on the amendment? Okay, if not, those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. Chair declares that amendment adopted. Clerk will please report the next amendment.
Delegate Doyle moves to amend the bill.
Chairman of 67, Delegate Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me make sure I have 4 amendments in there, and I think this should be the one that doesn't have a number in the system. I didn't see it's either number 1 or doesn't have a number.
This amendment is HFA Doyle 2-26, number 2.
I was hoping to do number 1 first. Yeah.
We'll take them in any order you want.
Thank you. And the reason, Mr. Speaker, I asked to do number 1, if number 1 is adopted, I intend to ask unanimous consent to withdraw all the others.
All right, clerk will please report Doyle Amendment number 1.
Yeah, that's the one. I know, that's what I said. Yeah.
Will the gentleman from 67 please approach the podium and order the amendments? All right, the clerk will read the First Amendment.
Delegate Doyle moves to amend the bill on page 5, section 2, line 112, following the words generating facility by inserting the words other than a generating facility that uses solar energy to generate electricity.
The question now is on the adoption of the amendment just read by the clerk. Gentleman 67, Delegate Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize to you and the membership for the confusion about the order of the amendments. I will say again that if this amendment is adopted, I will ask unanimous consent to withdraw all the others. The same arguments that were in favor of the amendment we just passed are valid for this one, too. The amendment we just passed removed wind from the provisions of the bill. For the same reason, I think we need to remove solar from the provisions of the bill. The first proposal in Jefferson County was for an 800-acre solar field. And it's interesting, that is why this bill got here. The developer, who happens to be a member of the Jefferson County Commission, rather than go through the process, decided to have the ordinance changed. But in the process, made a mistake, a legal mistake, broke the law in changing the process. Citizens took him to court, and the circuit judge ruled in their favor. Said that, no, you can't, if you're going to change the zoning ordinance, there's a process you have to go through, and you didn't do it. I believe, had he done it, he started over a year ago, he'd have his solar field now. He didn't bother to ask for what is called a conditional use permit. And so I think he is in a pickle, and it's one of his own making. And I think we should not bail him out of that. Not only, and he has appealed it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will decide sometime soon. I do think that there's a very good possibility that at some point in the future, the legislature might want to act on a statewide basis to govern this type of energy production. But I think we should wait until the court decides. That will give us some guidance. So, and at the same time, the local planning commission is already in the process of redoing the comprehensive plan, which must be done before a zoning ordinance is changed. That's state law. They're already at work redoing the comprehensive plan so that they can make this kind of use available in any zoning district, but with the kinds of controls that they need to have. If we pass the bill as is, that gives any developer of any kind of solar field an absolute right in statute, so that no local government can impose anything like setbacks or site plan review or anything like that. We shouldn't do that, particularly since the local government is already at work to fix the problem, and the state Supreme Court is about to give us some guidance. So I would suggest that we should pass this amendment just like we did the first one. Thank you.
The gentleman to 35th, Delegate Capito, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to get my amendments straight here, but I'm going to rise and urge rejection to the distinguished gentleman from the 67th's First Amendment. The reason being, it really defeats the bill, and I do think it is distinguishable from the First Amendment that we adopted from the gentleman from the 55th, and that when you evaluate these generators, I think there can be something can be said for each one individually, and therefore I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment.
Gentleman to 65th, Delegate Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speakers. Speak to the amendment. I also rise in rejection to the amendment. One of the things that energy wholesale generators are small-scale energy producers, and one of the most predominant one is solar. Now, this body is working on projects such as geothermal. They're working on carbon sequestration. Yes, we're working on wind projects. Excluding one of the most predominant energy wholesale generators tells the state that we are not energy diverse, and we do not want energy diversification. So I stand to reject the delegate's amendment excluding solar. Thank you.
Gentleman to 55th, Delegate Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also stand against this proposed amendment. It hurts the bill, and it proposes that solar is in the same category as wind, which is very far from the case. That's all I've got. I urge rejection.
Question again is on the amendment as read by the clerk. Is there further debate on the amendment? Gentleman to 51st, Delegate Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been a strong proponent of diversifying our energy economy and making it possible to develop solar and other types of electricity generation across West Virginia. But I do support this amendment. I think that if we're allowing solar and any other type of electricity generation to be built in West Virginia, it should follow zoning laws, zoning ordinances. You know, if a city or if a county has gone through the effort to implement zoning, let's follow those. Why do we have to overturn local control once again and assert that we know better than local communities about what should be built where? So let's be clear about what this amendment does. If this amendment passes, we're back to where we are with solar, which is solar needs to meet local zoning ordinances. That's all. We're not keeping solar from being developed. We're just saying if you develop solar, you need to be a good neighbor. And if you don't like local zoning, there are processes in place to get conditional use permits or things like that to allow solar development within a city or within a county. So for that reason, I'm supporting the amendment.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, Chair will recognize the gentleman to 67th to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it makes no logical sense to pass the First Amendment but not pass this one. Both solar and wind can be serious problems if these huge generating facilities are in a community. And I, too, am a strong supporter of alternative energy, solar, wind, geothermal, you name it. But we can't say to a community, you just got to take what we're going to give you. And I supported the First Amendment. Again, I think, yeah, those wind towers are tall. Solar fields are really big. And if you get them near a residential neighborhood, they can cause serious problems. So again, there's no urgency to this. We should wait for the court to decide, and in terms of solar, wait for the community to write the rules that work. I ask for the ayes and nays.
The question is on the adoption of the amendment as read by the clerk. A roll call vote on the amendment is demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 25 ayes, 68 nays, 7 members absent, less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. The clerk will please report the next amendment.
Delegate Doyle moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Doyle 226, number 2.
Gentleman 67, Delegate Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to reform my amendment.
Are there objections? No objections are heard. The clerk will please report the reformed amendment.
Delegate Doyle moves to amend the bill on page 5, section 2, line 112, following the words generating facility by inserting the words that uses coal, natural gas, or nuclear power to generate electricity.
The question is on the amendment as just read by the clerk. Gentleman 67, Delegate Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And actually, this is to some degree redundant because it repeats the amendment that we passed from the gentleman from Hardy. But it also says that anything other than these 3 named would come under local zoning. So that would not only be solar, it would be geothermal and anything else other than these 3. I urge adoption.
The question is on the amendment. Gentleman 35th, Delegate Capito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition and urge rejection of the amendment for the same reasons as the gentleman said. It's redundant. We're trying to encourage the cultivation of solar. So if you want to encourage solar, vote against this amendment.
Is there further debate on the amendment? If not, the question before the House is on the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. No. Noes appear to have it. The noes have it. Chair declares that amendment lost. The clerk will please report the next amendment.
Delegate Doyle moves to amend the bill on page 6, section 3, line 10, following the words zoning district by striking out the period and inserting the following. In any county that has adopted partial or total zoning on or after July 1st, 2024, this is HFA Doyle 226, number 3, revised.
The question is on the amendment just read by the clerk. Gentleman 67th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are presently 9 counties in West Virginia that have either countywide or countywide zoning, or that have zoned parts of their county. I do know that there are others who are considering it. I do think we should give them some time. I think, again, it's the argument that carried the day on the First Amendment, that if people locally want to make sure to retain the character of their community as it grows, as we attract businesses, that we should give them time to do so. I do know that some counties on the Virginia border want it, because every county in Virginia has zoning. And there are some economic development folks that say, hey, you know, that's one of the reasons that they do better than we do. When a business comes in, they want to be able to know what's going to be next door to them. So again, I think we need to make sure that every county in this state that wants to have this local control can have it. So I urge adoption.
Question is again on the amendment as read by the clerk. Chairman, the 35th Capito.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition and urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. I think, again, it cuts across the purpose of the bill. The whole point of the bill is to exempt wholesale generators from the zoning requirements, and this essentially, which they are exempt from, technically speaking, in all the counties that don't have zoning requirements. So really, it does nothing but set us back to exactly where we were before we took our pen out and started writing. So I'd urge rejection.
Question again is on the amendment as read by the clerk. Is there further debate on the amendment? Question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. No. Those appear to have it. Okay, those have it. Chair declares that amendment lost. Clerk will please report the next amendment.
Delegate Doyle moves to amend the bill on page 5, section 2, line 110, following the word entity by inserting the following: where the boundary of the project site is not located within 2,500 feet from the boundary of any lot within a residential subdivision of 5 or more lots on file with the clerk of the county at the time of application. And
question is on the amendment just read by the clerk. Chairman of 67, Delegate Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is self-explanatory, and it has to do with property rights. We hear a lot about property rights. We should think, whenever we talk about property rights, it's not just my property rights, it's somebody else's right too. This amendment is purely to protect residential neighborhoods that people move there anticipating a future, and all of a sudden would see that future disrupted. I urge adoption.
Chairman, 35th Delegate Capito.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the amendment. You know, recently we've been hearing a lot about property lines, distances where certain things can't occur within certain distances for safety. This is 2,500 feet. I've never seen anything that large in code. We've, again, been addressing bills like this before that set certain boundaries. This is obviously in multiple of anything, again, I've ever seen. This would certainly chill economic development, so I urge rejection.
Question again is on the amendment. Is there a debate on the amendment? If not, Chair recognizes the gentleman of 67 to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I find myself in serious disagreement with the Chair of Judiciary. I think this amendment would spur economic development, not stall it. I urge adoption.
Question now is on the amendment as read by the clerk. Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. No. Those appear to have it. Okay, the noes have it. Chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments?
Delegate Clark moves to amend the bill.
Chairman of the 65th, Delegate Clark.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw my amendment.
Are there objections? No objections are heard. That amendment will be withdrawn. Are there further amendments? If not, the clerk will read the bill a third time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4553 to clarify the application of zoning requirements to exempt wholesale generators.
Gentleman from the 35th, Delegate Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The committee substitute as amended amends and reenacts provisions of Chapter 8A of the Code relating to land use planning. It adds the definition of an exempt wholesale generator as one who is not an electric utility who intends to construct an electric generating facility as an exempt wholesale generator under federal law and who is seeking or has obtained PSC siting authorization. The bill also adds a subsection which provides that such an exempt wholesale generator is a permitted use in any zoning district. And with the adoption of the amendment offered by the gentleman from the 55th, this would exclude wind generation. So I urge passage of the bill as amended.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman 37, Delegate Pushkin is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to think back to when we had this bill in committee. It's been, well, it seems like years ago, but it's been several weeks ago. I think the bill has been parked on the House calendar for quite some time, and then was recently put back on the special calendar. If I remember correctly, there was a bipartisan opposition to this bill in committee, and I think I'll just go back to help explain for the entire body my interpretation of this bill. It seems like there is a certain piece of property in Jefferson County, partially owned by a member of the county commission, who before that was the chair of the planning commission, where they are wanting to put solar panels, or to put solar panels on the property, and then sell that power off. And I could see where the neighbors might feel like they're not getting a real fair shake when if they go to the planning commission and one of the owners of the property is the chair of the planning commission, and they go to the county commission and same owner of the property is on the county commission. And it seems like the only place that they could get that fair shake would go to court. That's what courts are for, to allow average citizens a place to address grievances. And they're going to court, and I feel that they've been successful in court because the law here seems to be on their side. So the county commissioner in question comes down to the legislature and tries to get the law changed. And this is the reason why people hate politics. It really is. This is a carve-out, it seems like, for one person. That might be why the bill's been parked on the House calendar for so long. And that's why the bill had bipartisan opposition in committee. For those of us that were here and heard the testimony, I've never heard anything like it. It's actually one of the worst bills I've seen this year, and that's saying a lot. This is special interest at its worst. I would strongly urge the body to do the fair thing, support the citizens who are currently in court fighting for their property rights, and not do a special favor for somebody's friend.
Is there additional debate on the bill? Chairman 67, Doyle is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the gentleman from the 37th for observing that this bill is indeed a sweetheart deal for one person who has a problem of his own making. We should not bail him out, particularly since local government is already in the process of rewriting the rules so he can do what he wants to do without even applying for the permit, and he could have be doing it now if he'd have been willing to just go apply for the permit. But more critically, because it is now before our state Supreme Court, and incidentally it's been delayed because he has had his lawyers ask for a continuance. So I think we should look for the court to give us guidance before we make law in this area. So I strongly urge rejection of the bill.
The gentleman is 66, Delegate Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I became aware that this legislation was being contemplated, I was a little torn because, I certainly do support local decision making. But as I learned more about this issue, not only determined that I would support the legislation, but I asked my esteemed colleague from the 65th to co-sponsor the legislation. And for me, it really boils down to this. In Jefferson County, and I suspect there's probably other areas of the state that do have zoning, our farm communities are really struggling. Our farmers are really struggling. They very much want to try to maintain and preserve their family farms, but they're looking for ways they can diversify their operations in order to not simply have farm after farm, be transformed into residential, housing. That's essentially what we see over the Eastern Panhandle. And while certainly we just passed a bill that deals with housing, it's again, I think most of us could agree that we want to try to preserve those family farms. And so both our county commission as well as our planning commission, our local duly elected and appointed officials have expressed support for these projects, but we do see individuals that seem to be trying to delay these projects. And quite frankly, when you try to delay these projects, that can be akin to killing projects. And so this legislation, I do commend my colleague for bringing this legislation forward. It simply tries to address an issue which, unless we clarify it, I think it very well could lead to the demise of additional family farms there in the Eastern Panhandle. So I would encourage your support for this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman to 65th, Doug Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permission to speak to the bill. And folks, I'm going to be short with you all. I know we're all getting ready for lunch here. Just a couple points of clarification. The developer is not the county commissioner that came down and testified. It's actually the EDF Renewables and Torch Energy. So I want to just clarify that for you all. What this bill does, I've heard comments that it's, taking away local control. I don't feel so. I feel that's giving the local county commissions and zoning boards an option to bring in additional revenue for their counties that are maybe hamstrung because the zoning ordinance that was written 10, 12, 15 years ago had no mention of any energy wholesale generators because they didn't exist. So this gives them an opportunity to make changes that are going to benefit their county. Just as an example, our county is looking at $134 million off of this one project. $134 million in our county. So we have a farmer who wants to continue farming his land. He's just not going to grow soybean and corn. He's going to farm energy. So allow them to continue farming their land, allow this county to generate $134 million and push green on the bill. Thank you.
The gentleman 37, Doug Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield?
Sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to clear something up because maybe I misheard the testimony during the judiciary hearing. The former chair of the Planning Commission who currently serves on the county commission, is it not on his family farm?
It's on a farm that someone in his family owns, not he personally.
Not
but
the
yes,
farm, the property that his family has owned for 300 years?
I don't know how long they've owned it.
Okay, well, I can go back and listen to the testimony, and I mean, he was under oath and said it was his family farm, but thank you.
Yeah, I was listening from the hospital with my wife, so I tried to pay attention as best I could.
Question again is, shall the bill pass? Is there further debate on the bill? The gentleman to 67, Doug Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would also like to clear up some confusion. I agree that farmers, not only in Jefferson County but in other parts of the state, are struggling. So does the local planning commission, which is precisely why they have been at work for these last several months rewriting the comprehensive plan so they can legally rewrite the ordinance so that farmers can do these things. We don't need to do it here. In terms of delay, the only delay is because the individual in question, who is a member of the Jefferson County Commission and who did say to the Judiciary Committee that the farm had been in his family for 300 years, chose not to at least try to go by the rules at the beginning. And he found himself in court because citizens noticed that the law was broken. And finally, we've heard that passing this bill will give the local folks an opportunity to make changes. No. If we pass this bill, we immediately pull the rug right out from under the people on the Planning Commission and others who have been working hard to make these local changes, and we pull the rug right out from under the state Supreme Court, because this bill will give the owners of the land and of these generating facilities an absolute right in statute. You will see the term permitted use in the bill. I think some people think this means you go get a permit. No, it doesn't. If the term permitted use is written in statute, it means you don't have to have a permit. It's already permitted by statute. So for this reason, I think this is a very bad bill. Thank you.
Gentleman third, Fluharty is recognized.
Thank you. The gentleman yield. From Judiciary Chairman. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to reflect back on the committee process and questions that were asked and clarify who qualifies as an exempt wholesale generator. That would include nuclear power plants, would it not?
I will preface any answer that I give to the gentleman that I was not in the chair for testimony, but I'll try to answer his questions as best as I can.
Well, let's pull up the definition real quick. Exempt wholesale generator means any person or entity who is not an electric utility, okay, and who intends to purchase or construct and operate an electric generating facility. So, a nuclear power plant would qualify under that criteria, would it not?
It would, but it would need a PSC siting certificate. And, right, and yeah.
Okay, so, now that we've reached that, that's all I had for you. Thank you. I mean, let's take a look at what we're actually voting on here. We talk about property rights, not in my backyard. Go back to your constituents and say, in your backyard, we're going to throw a nuclear power plant here and you have no control over it. That's what we're doing. For favoritism, as has been clarified on this floor just in the past few minutes. This is overreached by the legislative branch on the judicial process for favoritism, and it reeks. It reeked in committee, and it reeks on this floor. And I think we send it on its way, not pass it, allow the judiciary to take care of it in the court of law. And we should not be infringing on that. So I'll be voting no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question again is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Does the gentleman 35th wish to close debate on the bill? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 52 ayes, 42 nays, 6 members absent. A majority of members in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4553 to clarify the application of zoning requirements to exempt wholesale generators.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent, subject to announcements, that the House stand in recess until 1:30.
Are there announcements? Are there announcements? Gentleman 66, Delegate Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Excuse me for just a moment. I thought I had my announcement here, and now I do. Just for planning purposes, for those wishing to observe Ash Wednesday tomorrow, we have made arrangements for Monsignor Sam Sakis from the Basilica of the Co-Cathedral of the Sacred Heart to dispense ashes tomorrow morning from 8 to 9 a.m., and that will be in my office, room 246M. So again, Monsignor Sakis will be here for the dispensation of ashes the whip's office, room 246M, from 8 to 9 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman 25th, Douglas Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Ag and Nat Resources will meet following the floor session whenever it ends this evening in GovOrg immediately after the session ends. Thank you.
Lady in the 49th, Douglas Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet at 1:15 behind the chamber.
Chairman 22nd, Douglas Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the remarks by the gentleman from the 10th District on House Bill 4071 be printed in the appendix of the journal.
The permission's already been granted. Chairman of the 10th, Douglas Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will meet this afternoon following floor session. In House Judiciary, the agenda will be posted. Also, Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will host a public hearing on Friday, March 4th at 8 a.m. in the House chambers regarding Senate Bill 650. Those wishing to speak can sign up beginning at 7:30 on Friday morning in the House chamber. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman of the 48th, Douglas Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just by way of announcement, I'd just like to inform members, anyone interested, I have a resolution on my desk in support of the free and democratic nation of Ukraine that would impose state sanctions or request that the state impose state sanctions on the country of Russia, any Russian-made products. So if anybody'd like to sign that, it's on my desk.
Chairman of the 1st, Douglas Teslo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to inform the body that today one of our own is going to be getting a special award from the governor at 6 o'clock at the Cultural Center. He's as an artist, and of course I'm speaking of Charles Reynaud, better known as Charlie Reynolds. And I think it's a great honor, and Charlie, I hope I have time to get over there and watch you get this award from the governor. Thank you.
Chairman 37, Doug Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask unanimous consent that the two words spoken by the gentleman from the 19th regarding House Bill 4071 be entered into the appendix of the journal.
Are there objections? Okay, there are no objections. The gentleman of the 3rd, Douglas Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dems will caucus immediately following recess in GovOrg, and lunch will be provided.
Lady in the 38th, Douglas Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans will caucus immediately upon recess, and lunch has been provided. Grab it in the Majority Leader's office and come back in.
Are there further announcements? If not, Lady in the 49th, ask unanimous consent that the House stand in recess until 1:30. Are there objections? No objections are heard. The House is in recess until 1:30.
Which is the state's two other sections are in Article 2, two of them are in Article 3A, and one is in Article 4. This relates to short-form estate settlements. The bill, Mr. President, was brought to the legislature by the Probate Committee of the West Virginia State Bar, which I should just take a brief moment to compliment. Among all the bar committees, they are, in my judgment, at least from what I've seen, the most active in considering and providing to the legislature recommendations for changes in the area of law and that they have jurisdiction or was in their subject matter area. Under our state administration system now, we have, counties have two options. We have the regular, what I'll call the original traditional way, and that's where the administration is done through the county commission, the county clerk, and the county commission appoints fiduciary commissioners. That's basically Article 2 of Chapter 44. There's also another option and it's a fiduciary supervisor system. And that's provided for and set out in Article 3A. And there are some counties, Berkeley County is I know a county that uses a fiduciary supervisor system. My home county of Morgan does not. But counties have a choice in how they want to do it. What this bill does is it reconciles the short form settlement process through both systems, essentially, so that they're similar. More specifically, when a short form settlement is filed, it means all administrative matters are done. It means the creditors have been paid. The heirs have agreed to a proposed distribution. And that process includes publication of a 30-day notice before the estate can be closed. This bill will change that. And in counties that use the fiduciary supervisor system, when a short form settlement is filed, the estate cannot be closed without publication. This eliminates that. It makes other changes to sync up the process for short form settlements through two systems. This is following up on, I think it was last year, but it might have been the year before, a bill that we passed that created the short form system. This would make it uniform through the two different options the counties have for operating that. Be happy to try to answer any questions, Mr. President. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare them. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 266, adding definition of ammunition for purposes of obtaining state license to carry concealed deadly weapon. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 413, clarifying crime of harassment to include stalking. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our question unanimous consent that the bill be advanced to third with right to amend. Unanimous consent to withdraw that request. Mr. President, I move that the constitutional rule requiring bills to be read on 3 different days be suspended. The bill be read a third time and placed upon its passage.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the constitutional rule requiring the bills to be read on 3 different days be suspended and the bill be read a third time and placed upon its passage. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than 4/5 of the members present having voted in the affirmative, I declare the constitutional rules suspended. The clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 413, clarifying crime of harassment to include stalking. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 413 would amend a single section of our state code. It's Chapter 61. That's our criminal code, Article 2, Crimes Against the Person. Amendments are to Section 9A. And the bill would amend that section by reinserting into law the offense, a separate offense of stalking. Several years ago, the legislature rolled the elements of the offense of stalking, which had been a criminal offense under our law, into the offense of harassment. Since then, it has been suggested to us that there are beneficial reasons to preserve it as a second offense, as a separate offense, and that's what this bill would do. It defines offenses of stalking and harassment and changes, let me find the operative language in that section. it makes it an offense to stalk another person, and it adds language in a couple different places in that section, in subsection F and in subsection G of section 9A. Mr. President, be happy to try to answer questions. I urge the bill's passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine to ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand in recess until 4 p.m.
Are there announcements? Senator from Brooke.
Everybody's afternoon meeting announcements here. Your Committee on Health will be meeting at 1 p.m. in room 451M. Your Committee on Education will be meeting at 2 p.m. in 451M. Your Committee on Government Organization in room 208 West at 2 p.m. At 3 p.m., your Committee on the Judiciary will be meeting in 208 West, and your Committee on Finance will be meeting in 451M. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are there further announcements? Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. The members of the Senate Democratic Caucus will meet in the minority office immediately upon adjournment here.
Further announcements. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Your Pension Committee shall meet tomorrow afternoon at 2 p.m. in the Senate Finance Room. The agenda has been posted.
Further announcements. If not, the motion is to recess till 4 p.m. today. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We'll be in recess till 4 p.m. today.